curiosity, you mentioned like they would take henbane or opium or mushroom, but do we know like the specific group was taking a certain recipe or formula or potion?
Sure. I'll give you one example where we have like really good evidence. So in Greece in the 1st century, worshippers of the goddess Hera absolutely used cannabis. They were lighting it up, they were offering it to Hera, they were inhaling it themselves. Now, where it gets confusing is we don't know how they interpreted this. Did they interpret like the what we would call being high? Did they feel that Hera, the essence of Hera, was inside them, purely entheogenic? Or did they believe that in order to communicate with Hera, who is separate from them, they needed the cannabis, making it more something I would call extheogenic, generating a goddess outside the self? So we don't know. We do know that they were using it. One of the problems when you get into ancient history is that the sources are so fucking limited. And we don't know, ultimately, what people were using. Well, we know what they were using, but we don't know how they were using it. Hold on a second. I don't know if you noticed, but this isn't plugged in. So we know that the things they were using, we don't know how they used it, but in some cases, I would say it's weird. So it's chaotic in the ancient world. So while we don't know how the worshippers of Hera were using cannabis, we do know how people seeking the guidance of Isis used opium. We today know of opium as a painkiller. Believe it or not, when you read accounts of opium use in the ancient world, they were not using opium as a painkiller, at least not in the temples of Isis. In the temples of Isis, they used opium to knock you into a trance so that you could meet Isis in the spirit world and have her heal you. So it's odd every now and then because they were using some of the same things people use today, but they were using them for totally different reasons. The pain-killing aspects, although I'm absolutely recognized and certainly enjoyed, that wasn't why somebody would use opium in a temple of Isis, or Asclepius for that matter. Question?
Yeah, you mentioned a number of historical figures, and I think most of us are familiar with some base texts. But if somebody wanted to read more about Marcus or Simon Magus, where would they go?
Irenaeus, Hippolytus, Irenaeus and Hippolytus. Irenaeus wrote against the heresies, and Hippolytus wrote a title that it's weird because it's different, but in Latin it's the same title. It's against the heresies. Tertullian wrote 5 volumes against the heretic Marcus, which is also very interesting for knowing what people thought. One of the things I will say about this that comes up, and again, if you are interested, I will be speaking to Jerry Brown about this next Saturday, is that I don't believe church fathers covered up anything. This idea that a writer of the early church came across something that he found offensive and just, oh, I can't write that, is just nonsense. They wrote all kinds of shit. They were not prude at all. They were very forward in their thoughts about, these different practices. And when they did want to talk about psychedelics, they totally did. They didn't cover anything up.
And that this was an entheogenic thing where you mentioned there was a particular goddess, right?
Yes, Charis.
Right, Charis, who there was a sort of mystical marriage that took
Yes.
place.
Yes.
Between so the individual, were you saying he was giving this specifically to women or just to all of his followers?
Not to followers. That's the thing. The whole point about this was that they were supposed to go and find people that were not of the group to do this with.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the only reasons we know that he existed was that people went and then complained about him because they thought they had been violated.
Right. But the sort of...
No, seriously, yeah, exactly. Right? That doesn't sound familiar, right?
But the thought process was that via this entheogenic experience, that the individual would make themselves like a sort of waiting spouse for the goddess to marry, have this sort of mystical marriage with the goddess.
So, if you'll all indulge me for like 30 seconds, a lot of this, specifically what you're talking about, has to do with how Sophia, or Charis, was kicked out of the pleroma. Sophia ended up having an illegitimate child by having sex with herself. This illegitimate child's name was Ialdabaoth. Ialdabaoth is where we today, when we think of the devil, this was the earliest Christian invention of the devil, was Ialdabaoth, which sounds a lot like Yahweh, Lord of the Sabbath. The idea was that Ialdabaoth was made of materialism, flesh and blood. Gnosticism was all about, or at least in the broader sense Gnosticism, was all about immateriality. This is where, in an odd way, Zoroastrianism does play a role. Not as much as apocalyptic psychedelic Christianity, but still to a degree it plays a role here. They would... I forgot where I'm going with this. I drank a magic potion and it's been kicking in for the past like half hour, so I apologize.
So you were relating Ialdabaoth to Sophia.
To Sophia, yes. Yes, okay. Dave, thank you so much. This is, people like me need the Daves of the world to hold it all together so that we could be ridiculous. So thank you. What happened was, the cosmic Christ that Marcus or one of his, congregants or followers would take on had to do with, so Sophia, or Charis, had been kicked out of the pleroma because she had sex with herself, which was unnatural, and that birthed Ialdabaoth. Now, where the cosmic Christ comes in was that through fornication with the cosmic Christ, Sophia, or in Marcus's case, Charis, would be let back into the pleroma. So when they would go out to find these different people to engage in this ritual, they were trying to find a man or a woman who was willing to take on the role of Charis as he took on the role of the cosmic Christ to, for lack of a better way of putting it, fuck her back into immortality.
So in this particular context, the cosmic Christ figure is acting as a literal savior, right? So Christ is being, in the sense that...
Yes! Exactly.
In the sense that he's redeeming the goddess. The reason I'm asking this question is because this is fucking identical. I never knew this, all this stuff you told me. It's identical to the ceremonial magical process of redeeming what they call the redemption of the coin. The idea that Malkuth, or the shekel, needs to be sort of redeemed and reunited with Kamer. And in Thelema in particular, we have this whole process of knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, which is a literal marriage. That's how all the literature describes it. Much like this whole thing with Charis that you're talking about. The initiate goes through a sort of marriage, prepares himself as a bride to be married, to go through this sort of process of redemption.
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
I don't know, but
the short answer is yes. Yeah. The long answer is fuck yes.
I'm just fascinated because I never knew this little piece of history that you threw out.
Oh, thank you so much. Say that again for everybody listening at home.
I didn't know that little piece of history that you threw out.
I'm kidding, I'm not that vain. Who said yeah, right?
I said yeah, you are.
I said it under my breath.
Oh. Are there any other questions?
Over here.
Yes.
God, I got so into what you were just talking about. I'm going to come back to that. But
Falling. Wait, I'll try that again. Without falling.
okay, what I wanted to know is when you were talking about the Christ and that they crucified him for magic.
Well, no, the Romans crucified him for treason
Right.
because the Jews didn't arrest him in time to condemn him for magic.
Well, the Jews couldn't because they had no law. They were under Roman.
They had law, it's called the Torah.
But they had no law for domination. They couldn't go around.
Yes, they do, it's called the Torah.
All right, I'm not going to argue that, but
Smart move.
the point is that I was wondering if there was any relationship in these different languages between the gematria of the word magic and blasphemy.
No, in Jamaica, they do not have Latin word for that is pigmentati. That's the word for drug dealer in ancient Latin. Sir, I am your witness.
So, I was
Speaking to the mic.
So, I want you to talk a little bit more about...
You're not speaking to the mic.
This is all very new to me, but I want you to talk more about the scripture, because you said there was that one book that didn't make it into the... You talked about that mentioned...
As there was two!
The psychedelics, right? What were mentions of psychedelics that were in, like, scripture that didn't get included in the canonical Bible? Were there some that were excluded specifically because of that? Talk more.
No. We do not know, or at least I do not know why Esdras 2 was excluded from the New Testament. If you'd like to hear a funny story about a psychedelic experience that is included in the New Testament,
Yes.
I'm happy. In 1 Corinthians, Paul describes the Lord's Supper, the Kirakan Diapnum, which is, before I was talking about, it's what they called the sacred meal of Mitra. He says that the people that were indulging too much in this were getting sick or dying. Which I find rather interesting, because wine in those days only had an alcohol content of about 12%. So you don't, in order for, and again, you have to read this in the context of it being very natural to add psychoactives to wine. The fact that these people were having this kind of experience, when you read it in the original Greek, it's one of the things that Carl Ruck and I agree on 100%. It's very clear that they're talking about the people that were enjoying the Eucharist properly were having psychedelic experiences, and people that were indulging too much were actually having like sickness from it because they were taking too much, and we, don't take too much, because it can cause sickness and certain things like mushrooms. And I'm not saying that there were mushrooms in the Eucharist at Corinth, but other things like cannabis, henbane, mandrake, you'll have these feelings, not so much cannabis where you'll actually get sick because it doesn't do it. You might feel it mentally, but it's not doing anything. There was clearly something going on there, and the fact that Paul wouldn't even refer to this drink in a new sense and actually used a common term for the Eucharistic cup of Mitraism, it says a lot about what might have been in that cup. There's also never mind, because hands are up. Sir,
Real quick question about that. So that drink, do you think that they were using the same drink in different groups, and we just don't know what was in it necessarily? Yes. Okay, so it was like two of these, one of these. Or was it like sort of every group in every area kind of had their own recipe, I guess?
Yes, and as one example from history, so in the 1st century of the Common Era, Pliny, who wrote Natural History, records 90 different kinds of psychoactive wines in Italy alone. 90 different kinds. all of these having different amounts of a psychoactive in them, different kinds of psychoactives in them. In fact, with the Saturnalia, we know, so the Saturnalia is one of those things that became Christmas. I'm sure a lot of people in this room know that. Awesome. So with the Saturnalia, there's this really interesting passage from a guy named Lucian from Samosata, where he talks about some of the people were drinking the good wines that are often used in medicines, which means we know that it had cannabis or opium or mandrake in it because that's what they put in medicinal wines. And he said that people were whining that they would show up early and drink those wines and leave just the crappy, shitty wines for everybody else. So, yeah, people were selfish in those days too. They wanted their psychedelic experiences, and, you know, we literally have records of people complaining about that. Sir? Oh, I'm so sorry. That's right. This goes in there. Oh, like that. Perfect. Okay, this time for real. I'm sorry. I'm the worst. I'm so sorry. I should have said that before you all showed up tonight. I'm the absolute worst. Sorry. If you didn't know, I'm the worst. But the truth is,
So, what do you make of the modern Gnostic take on John in Revelations and his visions of the apocalypse as inspired by astral projection? Basically, that John is, in the Bible, it basically says that he's traveling in the spirit while he's seeing these.
sure. One of two things, and this is one of those things that I would say to my students back in the day. It is not the book of Revelations, it is Revelation. There was only one of them, by John. I would say that I do not believe that a psychedelic played any role in the book of Revelation, because like with Esdras 2 and other documents, it's made crystal clear when a person has taken a psychedelic. So we don't need to throw the psychedelic experience onto every single otherworldly or spiritual or magical experience. It's one of those things that I'm really not into, because within the psychedelic research community, there are a lot of people that as soon as they hear something that it's like, oh, that's interesting, it must have been a psychedelic, it's like, well, no, this is a human, thing. And it's totally possible to have these experiences, even with Esdras 2, the one instance where we have pretty concrete proof that a person was taking a psychedelic. This guy had 6 visions, totally unprompted by a psychedelic, before he needed the psychedelic to put it all together to understand what it all meant. So,
All right.
But he was on psychedelics when he did it.
Yeah, he was doing that,
He was
and
taking mescaline.
yeah, he was eating a lot of drugs, folks. So
drugs are bad, don't do drugs.
thank you, Nancy.
Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question about Paul and Mithras.
Never met the man.
So you're saying that the Christians, early Christians, were utilizing this Mithraic drink. And if I heard you right, you're suggesting that Paul may have introduced the Mithraic drink into the early Christian?
Yes.
So do you think that Paul, since he was a citizen of Rome, that he was actually initiated into the Mithraic mysteries?
No.
Okay, so would the Mithraic drink have been sort of common knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yes. It was common at the time. One of the things that so when we think of a mystery religion, I'm sure a lot of people in this room are familiar with the term of a mystery religion. No? I'm falling over. Yes. So with mystery religions, a mystery was not a question in the ancient world. We tend to think of a mystery as like a whodunit, right? That's not what mystery meant in the ancient world. A mystery was an explanation. So when you went to a mystery rite, what you were being presented with was the explanation acted out. And sometimes this did not include a psychedelic, other times it did. And we know when it did and when it didn't, and where it did and where it didn't. For, know in a strong sense. Yes?
Have you seen actual maps with the city of Nazareth on them that exist? Do you believe that the city of Nazareth exists?
I haven't seen a map, but I have seen inscriptions, so yes, I do believe it existed. Yeah, there's what's it called? You'll have to excuse me, I forget the proper name of it, but we have an inscription that lists a series of towns, areas in a specific, kind of region, and Nazareth is one of them. Archaeologists have dug up Nazareth as well. It wasn't a very impressive place. It was, we would think of it as a very poor area, but it did exist. At least, it existed enough that people in the ancient world took the time to, inscribe in stone that there was a place called Nazareth. Oh, the Q&A is my favorite part. Dying. Slowly. Dying. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Can I try that again with notes? Because I feel like there was a lot I left out. I'm kidding, I wouldn't put you through all that. But thank you so much for coming. I'm going to be talking about this stuff in a far more sober way with Jerry Brown next Saturday. We do